This podcast contains material of a violent and disturbing nature. It is not suited for all audiences.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Horror Tales, a podcast in which you can sit back and listen to a scary story. My name is Max Ablitzer and I'm the producer of Horror Tales. As this is our 10th episode, I would like to take a moment to thank all the incredibly talented authors who contributed their stories so far. They are in order of release:
Caleb Stevens,
G.D. Watry,
T.E. Grau, Timothy G. Huguenin, Clint Smith,
Christopher Sladsky,
Krista Carmen,
Brian Evanson.
On our homepage at horrortalespodcast.com, you can find the full list of the authors, as well as a link to their homepage where you can discover more of their amazing work. By purchasing one of their releases, you're supporting today's thriving horror talents. So if you enjoyed the story, buy their book. Also, I'd love to hear from you. Which story has been your favorite so far? Let me know on Facebook at Horror Tales Podcast in 3 words, or on Instagram and Twitter at Horror Tales Pod in 1 word. That is Horror Tales Podcast on Facebook and Horror Tales Pod on Twitter and Instagram. But now to today's story, which was written by Kevin Lucia and is part of his newest collection, Things You Need. It is narrated by Allyson Latondress, and the music and sound design are as always produced by myself. It is called Almost Home.
How much longer? Not long, I don't think. How long? Mary blinked at the rain-slicked windshield while her mind struggled against the wiper's droning metronome. She was so tired. Tired of driving. Tired of not knowing when it would end. I chose this. Shouldn't complain. She touched the .38 under her belt. The cold metal chilled her fingertips. Shivering, she pulled her hand away. Bile churned in her gut, made her mouth taste sour, because she couldn't blame anyone but herself for this. She'd known what Barry had been like. God help her, she'd known. And it wasn't as if people hadn't warned her, but she hadn't listened, because she'd thought she could change him, make him better. And now, here they were. Shit! Johnny, watch your mouth. She glanced over her shoulder into the back seat. What's wrong? The old Game Boy she'd bought for him at a thrift store in Clifton Heights warbled. Arcs of light from the tiny screen played across Johnny's forehead, accentuating the angles of his nose and cheeks, flaring in the hollows under his eyes. Only 2 lives left, thanks fucking hard. She faced forward and squinted at the rain-blurred road. Don't swear, honey. It's crude. Dad swore. She swallowed all the sharp words she wanted to spew about him. Well, I don't want you to. It's low. You're gonna do better, okay? Tiny stars blossomed over Johnny's cheeks while his thumbs raced. Whatever. No, you can change, Johnny, if you want to. Sure. It wasn't much of an answer, but they were both tired and Johnny was too absorbed in the Game Boy for her to push the issue much further. Still, she persisted. She was his mother after all. Find time to pick that responsibility up. Where was she when the bruises on his arms had started showing? When he started complaining of backaches? Where was she when Johnny got his first black eye falling down outside? She sucked in a deep breath, swallowing her self-recrimination. You can always change, Johnny. Always. Okay. When's the next stop? My butt hurts. She bit her lip. They hadn't seen anything for miles, and the highway stretched out before them into the dark. A black strip, broken only by pale yellow lines. Wet darkness swirled around them as it rained. Only a few pinprick stars glimmered through the night's velvet curtain, along with snatches of bone-white moon. They'd gotten lost, probably took a wrong turn after Clifton Heights. The next stop could be minutes or hours away, and she had no way of knowing. She could try the map, but all those lines and interstate numbers only confused her. She glanced at the gas gauge. The needle trembled inside the yellow of caution, above the red of empty. Her stomach cramped. I don't know, kiddo. Hopefully we'll find something soon. Vinyl seating squeaked and electronic trumpets blared. Whatever. I just want to get up and walk around a little. She didn't answer, swallowing bitter fear. Her stomach chewed on doubt and empty promises. Here was the truth. Things were no better now than they were before. Barry's behavior had been erratic, impossible to predict, and life with him had been a violent roller coaster ride. But they'd had a home, at least, a place to call their own, a roof over their heads, food, shelter, warmth. Now, she gazed in the rearview mirror. Its cracked glass reflected her worn face, her skin pulled tight at the corners of her mouth. Old bruises shadowed her eyes. Johnny looked much better than she did. Thankfully, young skin healed faster. She frowned. That's not my face. Her mirror eyes laughed. The gun pressed against her belly. She dreamed of pulling its trigger soon and making all her regrets and nightmares disappear for good. No, not yet. Mary drove to the tune of the Game Boy's warbles. Johnny had shut the Game Boy off and fallen asleep in the back. The silence made her eyelids flutter as she drove. She'd tried listening to the radio to stay awake, but all it seemed to play were angry evangelists and shouting politicians. She'd turned it off, and the silence had swallowed them whole. Her arms trembled. Fatigue burned her stomach. Something caught her gaze. Up ahead, on the right side of the road, a building shimmered through the raindrops. A rest stop and welcome center, built of night-washed brick, its parking lot empty. Understandable, given the late hour. Still, something about the place bothered her. She frowned, glancing over her shoulder at Johnny. Curled up on the back seat, he seemed babyish. Hard to imagine him swearing. Stringy brown bangs sprawled across his forehead and eyes. She risked reaching back and brushing them away. As her fingertips grazed his smooth skin, a chill coiled around her spine. She glanced forward, flicked on the turn signal, slowed, and pulled off the highway and into the rest stop's parking lot. Dim halogen lights spilled piss-yellow splashes over the building and onto the ground. Nearby sat a small, neglected park sporting a few leafless trees, shadowed shapes of picnic tables and grills huddled among them. She parked at the building's entrance, where a sign read, "Welcome to Webb County." She stared at the gas gauge and saw the needle hovering over red. Fear chilled her stomach. She had no money left for gas, had spent her last few dollars on Johnny's Game Boy. She'd almost said no, but something made her give in. She wasn't sure what. Maybe it had been her desperate need to see Johnny smile, showing the grin all boys his age should wear. She hadn't seen him smile in such a long time, not since before Barry had been laid off from the lumber mill. Or maybe it had been the kindly shopkeeper at the thrift store, a tall, regal man with white hair and deep green eyes, smiling so gently at Johnny, offering to knock $5 off the price. Now, staring at the fuel gauge, she felt guilty for buying the Game Boy. A few dollars wouldn't have made much difference, but still, the guilt, along with a million other sharp regrets, jabbed into her heart. Something crumbled deep inside her. She bowed her head, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, then reached under her shirt and pulled out the gun. Her skin reveled and recoiled as she touched it. Here was power. Here was weakness, too. Here also was truth. She cradled the gun in her lap and thought hard for a long time. Wake up, we're here. Did we stop? For a while, yes. Are we there yet? Not yet. Just taking a rest. We've got a little more to go. Only a little more. A sharp report shook the car. She woke and shivered, suddenly cold from the night air Johnny had let in. She rubbed her eyes and glanced into the back seat. He'd already buckled himself up and was once again playing his Game Boy. Somehow she found the strength to smile. All set? A bare nod. Yep, kinda hungry. But there weren't any snack machines here. Maybe at the next one. She glanced away as she backed the car out. She hadn't told Johnny she'd spent the last few dollars on the Game Boy. Maybe enough quarters still rattled around in her purse to buy a bag of chips or cookies so she could avoid the issue a little longer. Besides, maybe at the next stop, she'd see someone she could borrow a few bucks from. Beg a few bucks. Why lie to herself? As she drove on, the night swirled around them. It had stopped raining and was now only misting. She looked at the gas gauge. It had dropped deeper into the red band, but it hadn't hit bottom yet. Maybe if she reached the next stop, she'd find help. Maybe. The gun rubbed against her waist, mocking the thought, reminding her of its presence, always reminding. We're close, aren't we? I think so. Maybe. Hard to tell. I hope so. I'm so tired. I know, and I'm sorry. But it'll be better. Soon. Promise? A nod and a smile. Promise. She blinked and sat up. Raindrops tapped the windshield, roof, and hood. The car felt warm and close, stifling. Her head swimming with fatigue, Mary tried to brush off sleep, tried to focus. They'd found another rest stop. Johnny had left to buy snacks? Use the bathroom again? Had he found change in her purse after all? She squinted at the building through the rain, lips unconsciously forming the words on its welcome sign. Then she yawned. She hadn't dozed nearly as long as she could have. Something had woken her. Raindrops? It kept raining. It would stop for a while, and then, inevitably, it would start raining again. So, the raindrops had woken her up. Settling back into the driver's seat, she frowned at the thought. No, that wasn't quite right. Things felt wrong, disjointed, like a CD skipping in the middle of a song, getting hung up on the same phrase over and over. Worse, the sensation felt familiar, but she wasn't sure why. Her gut twisted into knots. Of course it felt familiar. It was her life. It had always been like this, right? Ruined CD, ruined song, ruined life. A sudden need to move consumed her. She reached under her seat, pulled her purse into her lap, and started rummaging through it. At first, she found nothing but old lipstick tubes, crushed tampons, and a few brittle sticks of gum. No money. Either she'd given it to Johnny and he'd gone inside to buy something, or he'd needed the bathroom again. Strange. She couldn't remember. Her searching fingers found a folded brochure. She dug it out and opened it. A welcome to brochure, the kind found at rest stops everywhere. A tiny pinprick of alarm blossomed in her heart. She tried to swallow, but her throat clenched, tight and dry. Under a rising tide of panic, cold realization bloomed. She couldn't remember what state or county this was. How far had they come since their last stop? She flattened the brochure on her thigh. It read, "Welcome to Webb County." Her heart skipped a beat. She looked at the sign outside the car again. Welcome to Webb County. Back to the brochure. It was worn, soiled, colors faded, as if it had languished in her purse forever. Her desperate eyes read the sign once more, hoping for something different. What the hell? Something was wrong. She and Johnny needed to get back on the road until she sorted this out. Had she made another wrong turn? Gone south when she wanted to go north? Accidentally doubled back the way they'd come? She grabbed the door handle, but then stopped. Something nagged her. Opening the door felt wrong, out of place. How long had she been driving? Her stomach quivered. She didn't know. Stupid. You're tired. Need sleep. That's all. She shut off the ignition so she wouldn't waste gas. Breathing deeply, spots clouding her vision, she exited the car. Johnny? She stepped inside the rest stop, turned right into an empty lobby. Grit crunched underfoot. The place hadn't been swept in ages. Pale fluorescent lights flickered above, throwing ghosts on the walls and floors. Something dripped back in the shadowed recesses. The information center in the far corner was in shambles, brochures scattered on the floor. The air tasted stale, as if she was the first person to breathe it in years. Her hand strayed to the gun, but she clenched her fist. Johnny, you're creeping me out, Chief. Come on. Something shifted. She turned and faced two doors, bathrooms. Light glimmered around the door on her left, pulling her toward it. Each step dragged, her own breath roaring in her ears, heart pounding. Something waited behind that door. Johnny? Another step. Her hand trembled near the gun.
That you?
Rustling and sliding behind the door. She bit her tongue, tasting copper saltiness. Sweat chilled her forehead, and a rotten scent crept into her nostrils. She reached beneath her ragged sweatshirt for the gun. Sweaty fingers closed around the grip, index finger curled on the trigger. She breathed frosty white plumes, the air suddenly much colder than it had been moments before, as if someone had abruptly turned the thermostat down. She pulled the gun from her waistband. Her nerveless fingers fumbled with the pistol, nearly dropping it as she felt more than heard something sliding behind the door. She licked sour, cracked lips. Headlights splashed through the glass front doors, panning the far walls. Tires crunched asphalt and gravel, and an engine idled.
Finally! Thank God!
She turned toward the light.
Johnny! Quit screwing around! Someone's here!
The bathroom door thumped, rattling in its frame. She cried out. Growls rumbled behind the door, low and wet. Another slam. She spun and pointed the gun at the door, but couldn't level it. The muzzle weighed 1,000 pounds, and dizzying fear weakened her, turning her muscles into rubber. Someone cried out. All fell quiet. She glanced back toward the headlights. The cry had come from there. Slowly, she backpedaled, lowering the gun. Squinting in the headlights' glare, she saw something which ripped her breath away. Confusion tilted the floor, and she wobbled. She steadied herself with a palm against the glass door. Outside, her rusted old Ford Escort idled, which didn't make sense. She'd turned it off. And where was the other car she'd heard pull in? Inside her car, however, she saw something that blew all her other questions away. Johnny slept against the passenger's side window. Though he hadn't been in the car when she'd gotten out, there he was, sleeping innocently, face peaceful and relaxed. Next to him, and behind the wheel, sat... The world spun away. Quiet hysteria roared behind her eyes. It was her, crying, tears streaming down a broken face, eyes gazing at Johnny with desperate madness. Something metallic gleamed in her hand. The gun. The .38 she'd taken from Barry, the one she'd kept tucked in her waistband the entire time, the one she clutched in a white-knuckled grip right now.
Please, God, no!
The other Mary raised the gun and tenderly planted the muzzle against Johnny's temple. She struck the glass, the impact stinging her palm.
No! Damn it, no!
She wanted to run, her brain sending frenzied signals for her legs to move. Something inside her screaming she had to stop this, had to get out there and stop this. But her legs wouldn't move. A distant pop. Johnny's head jerked. Crimson whorls painted the window as he sagged down into his seat. She stared as the other Mary swallowed the muzzle and pulled the trigger. Another pop, this time louder. A wet, meaty thump. She stumbled back from the entrance, away from the car, away from what she'd seen. It was a bad dream, a hallucination. She was tired, seeing things. Desperate, she fumbled with the gun's cartridge chamber. There should be 6 full chambers, because she'd never shot it. Never shot it because that bastard Barry had seen reason. Or at least hadn't wanted his balls blown off. So he'd let them go, and she hadn't fired a shot. She hadn't done this horrible thing because she'd only dreamed it, and there should be 6 bullets. 6 bullets. The cartridge cylinder clicked open. It spun lazily, then slowed, showing 2 empty bullet casings, side by side, in their chambers. No. I didn't. The thing in the bathroom slammed against the door again, scratching and whining. She closed her eyes and saw blood, matted hair, the small, red, wet hole in Johnny's temple. The bathroom door thundered. Claws skittered on concrete. She opened her eyes and pointed the gun at the bathroom door, her finger tightening on the trigger. The growling stopped. The door fell silent and still. She couldn't take this. It was too much. So many images spun in her head. She couldn't change it, couldn't make it different or better. It was like before. Always like before. Always. She closed her eyes and jammed the muzzle deep into her mouth. Her teeth clicked against its metal. A warbling tune flowed from behind the bathroom door, stopping her. She strained to hear the odd yet familiar music. Fanfare trumpets, jingles and jangles. The Game Boy! She pulled the gun from her mouth, opening her eyes. Johnny? Silence. No growls or scratching. Tears welled. She blinked, felt them overflow, cascading down her cheeks.
Please, I don't want to do this anymore.
A sob twisted her chest, and she shuddered.
I'm so sorry.
The door swung wide open, slowly. Backlit by a soft glow, an adolescent form approached her. Its face cloaked in shadow. It stopped a few feet away and stared at her with white, shining eyes, which cast ghostly light across the soft contours of its face. She sniffled and wiped her eyes, a curious peace flooding her. She reached out. Wordlessly, it took her hand. As they walked toward the exit, a stray thought stopped her. She glanced down and saw the revolver gleaming in her hand. Biting her lip, she tossed it away. It clattered on the cement, its echo thin and insignificant. They left the rest stop and climbed inside the now empty, still idling Escort. She put it into gear, pulled away, and re-entered the darkness ahead. They rode in silence until she whispered, "How much longer?" "Not long," it answered. "We're almost there." She slipped a hand under her shirt and felt nothing but warm skin. "Promise?" "Promise." She smiled.
Thank you for listening to Horror Tales. If you would like to support us, share the podcast with your friends and on social media. My name is Max Ablitzer, and as you may know by now, I'm a music composer and sound designer. I do work on commission and would be more than happy to produce a custom score or sound design for your own project. You can get in touch with me over at horrortalespodcast.com. That is horrortalespodcast.com. A special thank you to Kevin Lucia for contributing the story, Almost Home. The story is part of his newest collection, Things You Need, and you can purchase it right now on Amazon. You can also visit Kevin on his website at kevinluciablogspot.com. And when you subscribe to his newsletter, you will receive 3 free ebooks from him. Also, a huge thank you to Allyson Latondress for narrating this story. You can follow Allyson Latondress on Twitter under @LatondressVO. That is @LatondressVO on Twitter. I hope you enjoyed listening, and let's meet again on the next episode of Horror Tales.